Welcome to Menopause Rescue. I'm Dr. Polly Watson. Midlife women are often caught up in a sea of symptoms. Too often, they're overwhelmed by the lack of support from mainstream healthcare. They're inundated with so-called experts who are selling solutions which may lack credibility. I'm a Menopause Society certified gynecologist with both traditional and functional medicine training. I'm here to guide you through this transition and help you decipher the facts from the fads. Armed with credible information, I hope you are empowered to rescue and restore your health, making the second half of your life your best. Welcome to Menopause Rescue. I'm your host, Dr. Polly Watson. Today, we are going to have what I hope will be a very relevant conversation to anybody. We're going to be talking with Jennifer Calogero, who's an ovarian cancer survivor as a very young woman. She works in tech and leads a product team at Red Hat. And she's kind enough to share parts of her journey with us and also some strategies that were super helpful for her. I know I learned things. Super easy, quick thing is something called audio cardio, which is really helpful for people who have tinnitus or ear ringing, which is a common side effect after chemo. Her doctors didn't know about that. I didn't know about it. She did it and it helped her. So after 3 surgeries and 6 rounds of chemotherapy, Jennifer no longer has any detectable cancer. And now she's managing a medication and surgically induced menopause. She's been in survivorship for a year. Her healing journey has been shaped by somatic therapy and breathwork, which help her navigate side effects with greater ease and awareness. So I really loved this conversation with Jennifer today, and I know you will too. So please join me in welcoming Jennifer Calogero to Menopause Rescue. So thank you, Jennifer, so much for being here and sharing your story with us. I feel like I've learned a lot from you and have been really inspired by your advocacy for your own health care and your perseverance. And I just feel like your example of promoting wellness through illness could be a real helpful example for so many people, particularly when I think staying positive seems, I don't know why it feels like it's so much harder right now, but things feel a lot harder right now. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to do this. I love sharing knowledge and information and talking about my experience and hearing other people's experience. So I'm just really happy to be able to do that.
So tell us a little bit about your cancer journey and kind of how we got here today.
So I had ovarian cyst a while back and had one ovary removed. There's something called borderline tumor, which is kind of like a precancerous type of tumor, and it's not really well understood. So there was some confusion amongst my different doctors, OBGYN and whatnot, about if I had had cancer or not, because cancer and malignancy is kind of a spectrum. And there are things that are like low malignancy potential, and that's what I had, LMP, low malignancy. So I had borderline. And then when I started having another issue on my remaining ovary, that was showing up in ultrasound, I had a cyst that wouldn't go away and it was there. And I kind of felt off, like I felt like something was wrong. And so I kept going to different doctors and saying, hey, I don't feel right. I feel like my hormones are out of whack or something. And, I have pain when I ovulate. They would do these scans and they say, you have a cyst, but it's not growing. You're fine. Looked at your past thing. You had not had cancer. It wasn't cancer that you'd had. So we'll just monitor it. But thankfully, I was encouraged to and asked to go back to my oncologist because my first surgery had been done by an oncologist, so that they could test everything when they took out my first ovary. And what borderline tumors turn into is low-grade ovarian cancer, which is a very rare form of ovarian cancer that's slow growing. which is why on scans it would look the same every time they would do the scans, because they couldn't see that it was changing because it's a slow growing cancer. So low grade is not well studied and understood, and a lot of women go misdiagnosed for many, many years with it. So I was actually really fortunate that we found it at that point in time, and then I basically went through they removed as much as they could when they went in there. They removed all visible forms of the tumor, and they did a pelvic wash, and the pelvic wash had microscopic cells in the wash. So because of that, they wanted to do chemotherapy. Chemotherapy is not very effective for low grade, but they were advocating for it. And so we went through 6 rounds, carboplatin and Taxol, which is also, it's like a kind of an old school chemo. So had hair loss and the whole 9 yards of like all the chemo symptoms and effects. Didn't like chemo's changed in terms of like the nausea and weight loss kind of stuff now these days because of the other meds they give people now with chemo. But it was, yeah, rough go with it. And then after I had my full hysterectomy, which allowed them to take a second look surgery, which is a nice thing to have because it's so much better than a scan. They can go in and actually look with their eyes and see and do another wash and test the wash for microscopic cells. So after the rounds, I was negative for cancer when they did the wash, which was really great because that's at the microscopic level, not just at the scan level,
Right.
which is really helpful. So that was great. But since then, I have gone on hormone blockers, or aromatase inhibitors called letrozole, which basically prevents my body from making estrogen. I already don't make a lot because of my ovaries being removed, but this prevents other pathways of estrogen formation in my body. So it has been, yeah, a wild and intense ride as far as that goes.
So, I mean, I think that's a really important point to kind of drive home for folks. So, a natural menopause is a progression, sort of like puberty in reverse. And so there are peaks and valleys, but you're kind of stair stepping down over perimenopause lasts for between 2 and 10 years. So, not only were you surgically menopausal, where your ovaries were removed, but what letrozole does, it's an aromatase inhibitor. So, we make testosterone from our adrenal glands, and in fat, we can convert testosterone to estrogen via an enzyme called aromatase. And so it blocks that conversion. And so not only were you surgically menopausal, but you were just completely blocked. So instead of a sort of a natural process that takes like 2 to 10 years, it was a light switch with extra pharmacological help. So do you
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about like what that felt like? Because that's kind of like falling off a hormonal cliff.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty, it's drastic, and then people don't necessarily understand it, like the folks around you, or your support system. And it's a whole nother part of the cancer survivor journey that people don't understand, how much it impacts the survivors. And then often you have to be on these meds for quite a long time, especially with like a low grade cancer or depending on like, the details of your cancer. But I was gonna have to be on it for 5 years because my pelvic wash was negative. They said 2. I was so relieved because there's the side effects, and then it's also very scary to be younger. I'm 40 right now, and to be younger and know that your body doesn't have that estrogen, and then you're wondering what is going to happen later in life because of that lack of estrogen, knowing all the risks of, all the things that affect women in menopause, um, and all the studies that they've done now that where they show like, okay, if you don't do estrogen supplementation or hormonal therapies, there's all these things that also happen and as your body as it ages. So that's a really scary thing psychologically, on top of like the physical stuff you have to deal with at the present moment. You have like fear about the future as well. I think that's weighed on me like super heavily. But the hot flashes and stuff are more extreme. The cognitively, there's definitely a whole thing. You're also coming out of chemotherapy, which affects your brain. You have chemo
Mhm.
brain fog as well. Chemo I was on does nerve damage, so your body is kind of healing from that nerve damage. You might have a lot of systemic inflammation from all the damage that was kind of done. So the biggest thing though was sleep. And
Mm,
sleep is so huge. And I did not sleep for a very long time. It felt like months. So, or when I would sleep, it would be a different type of sleep. It wouldn't be deep and restful. It would be like vivid, intense dreams. My brain is just overactive.
right.
And so you'd wake up feeling like you just ran a marathon every single day. And then cognitively, you would feel weird throughout the day, and your memories affected, your moods affected, um, just my ability to function, just going back to my, working and getting back into the groove of like taking on my regular like level of responsibility at work. It's like, how can I do this? It's really a challenge. And then folks don't realize I don't like the term hot flash because I feel like it doesn't like actually convey what a hot flash is.
Yeah.
Like, women have all different experiences, but people are like, oh, you just got hot for a minute. Like, it's fine. No, it's not. It's like, I feel it coming. It was like a wave of nausea. And, you'd have the hot flash and your like my body would ache and I'd feel like disoriented and stuff like that. So just way more intense. And I would just think all the time about what can I do to protect my brain and what can I do to protect my bones and my body.
Yeah. And so you're a really smart person. Your brain is your job, right? You work in technology, you lead a team. And so it's not like you're a carpenter, right? Like your brain is your job. And we
Yeah.
certainly know that when women are going through perimenopause and estrogen levels are changing, we lose sort of short-term memory, language acquisition, all those things. But again, all that happened very, very quickly. So how did you cope at work? Because like you're saying, you're on letrozole for 2 years. Like this is a long time. And then you're overlying that with poor sleep. You're overlying that with the stress of being diagnosed with cancer as a very young person. So like, how did you cope at work?
I did talk about disability, like with people at work, with my management and even with like some of my colleagues and stuff, and like communicated to people what I needed. Sometimes I work from home like more often and don't go into the office because I can feel really run down after being in the office.
Hmm.
So I just had open conversation with folks about what my needs were, and then also you start to deal with like a bigger degree of imposter syndrome, where you're like, am I able to do what I used to be able to do? It can be scary. It kind of affects your self-esteem, and it affects your identity too, because who you are and what you do and the work that you do and the value you create in a capitalist society closely tied to your identity. So there were periods of time where I would like grieve for the past person I was and wanted to give myself the space to do that, to grieve who I was, but then also learn and to think about value and myself in new ways and the role that I play not only at work but in the world
Hmm.
and what is important to me as an individual, not just like what I show up to do to make money or to contribute to society, like thinking about what does it mean to contribute to society and where does my value lie. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that, journaling about that. I've been working with like a coach on some of that kinds of stuff and just reframing myself, my ego, my identity, and that whole journey. And then just setting boundaries where I need to have boundaries sometimes, where I'm like, this is a lot. My nervous system is different now.
Mm-hmm.
I say that sometimes to my boss. I'm like, I'm a different person in terms of my nervous system, and my brain will go into fight or flight way more easily. I can get more overwhelmed way more easily. And then my breath work practice that I did through my cancer journey and afterwards has been absolutely critical for me being able to just manage the stress of work and the stress of life.
So you got a lot of benefit from both somatic therapy and from breath work. So some folks may not know what somatic therapy is. So could you kind of just start off by explaining that to people because they may not be familiar?
Absolutely. I actually came across like things about somatic therapy when I was kind of on a pain management journey because I have low back issues and degenerative disc disease and had a herniation a couple times through my life and whatnot. And I learned about this biopsychosocial approach to pain management. And that helped me a lot in my pain management journey is understanding that the pain happens in the brain. So I started to learn more about the mind body connection and how powerful the mind is and how the what is in the mind is in the body, and there's the connection between the two. When I was facing my cancer journey and all of the fear and anxiety about approaching treatment and not knowing who I'm going to be on the other side of it and what's going to happen, I discovered Gabor Mate, who is one of my favorite authors, and a lot of his audiobooks are available on Spotify or on the internet. He's also done a lot of speaking engagements, TED Talks, podcasts, like all that stuff. So you can Google him and find a wealth of things. But I would just go on these really long walks and listen to Gabor. There's also a really popular book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der, who is kind of considered like the one of the founding fathers of somatic work and somatic therapy. But the stuff that Gabor would speak about would really resonate very deeply with me. And it's about how the trauma that we go through in life can be held in our bodies. He wrote a book called When the Body Says No, and that has been an important book in my life because I always said yes. I always wanted to say yes to people, to work, to family, to my relationships, everyone around me. I wanted to be helpful, supportive, and I always said yes. And sometimes I would marginalize myself and my own needs because I wanted to be loved, accepted, valued by other people. And this can come from different places of trauma, rooted in trauma, like wanting to feel like you're good enough, right? Like growing up as a child, there are times when you maybe felt like you weren't good enough. Things happened and you didn't get the love and support you might have needed or at that point in time, or you felt like you had to face your challenges alone, and you learned to be hyper independent and maybe not feel comfortable relying on other people. Asking people to help you, asking for help can be so hard. And I think this is a huge thing for women too. And okay, people think about trauma as like I went through some crazy thing that was horrific.
Capital T trauma.
Capital T trauma, but there is something called complex PTSD, which is more like a trauma, a low grade trauma that doesn't go away for a really long time and exists in your life for a really long time. So if you're in a high stress job, or you are dealing with like a sick family member or something like that for a really long time and needing to be a caregiver, like every day your nervous system is in a state of anxiety because you're worried about what's going to happen. You're worried about, am I doing the right thing? And when your brain is in that state and your body is in that state of tension day after day after day, it resets your baseline for what normal is for stress and anxiety in your life. And it can be really hard to get your body to come down to a new normal of being more grounded or more calm in your day to day. And in work, in corporate, in the tech industry, this is really, really common, where you feel like you have a responsibility to do a thing, but you can't do it because there's something blocking you, right? And you can be very anxious and very stressed because you feel like you're failing and not doing your job or doing what you need to do or showing up but you're prevented by things. So that can create a lot of stress. And when you're in that stress environment for many, many years, your nervous system is very frazzled, right? And then small things can set you off very easily. It can be hard to navigate complex conversations with people or challenges that you might face because your brain will get sent into that fight or flight just so easily. So there's different types of trauma, and just because you haven't been through some horrific accident or, served in the military or whatever, it doesn't mean that you can't have some form of like trauma that is relevant to what you are experiencing today. Yeah. Even just like as you grow up as a child, like self-esteem or anxiety, social anxiety issues and stuff. Like these are all kinds of like low-grade traumas that you can experience. So yeah.
I love that you talked about Gabor because he did a workshop at Integrated Medicine and Mental Health this year. So I was there and I got to be a part of that. So he's an extraordinary person. But I love your kind of talking about PTSD outside of capital D trauma. And I think we might kind of bring that home to somatic work with that kind of concept of PTSD. So maybe a lot of people are familiar with a veteran who was exposed to a bomb on the side of the road, right? And so they were in a heightened nervous system state. They were in a life or death situation. They heard a loud noise and they associated that with a near death experience, right? And maybe significant injury. They come back home. They're in day-to-day life. It's no longer, in reality, it's no longer a life or death situation, and a car backfires. But their nervous system and their body associates that sound with a near fatal or a threat to life, right? And so when you're kind of talking about how the body perceives pain, right? If you're coming into a health challenge with your nervous system kind of at 9.5 out of 10, everything is amplified. Pain is amplified. And then from a hormonal perspective, when you block estrogen, right? Estrogen is anti-inflammatory. So biochemically, you're turned up to an 11, right? And so I love your sort of bringing that concept home of what was the nervous system that I walked into this health crisis with, and how does that affect my physical experience through that health crisis? So I think that was really helpful for folks to kind of link those two, because we always talk about the body and mind like they're separate, but they're not, right? You piss someone off, their blood pressure is going to go up and they might go have diarrhea, right? Like this is connected.
Yes, it's true. And so the body keeps the score. Like all these things accumulate in our body and the threat can pass. It's still there. The memories are there. And even between generations, the memories are there in our bodies through epigenetics. We know this is true. You know, women who go through stress during pregnancy, it affects the genetics of their babies. Like things get passed down. It's a like survival peak at the DNA level that sometimes doesn't serve us. So stress management, things like that. Okay, great. That's great. Okay, I'm gonna like, you know, try to eliminate stress in my life. I'm gonna have healthier boundaries. I'm gonna go to yoga or do some breath work. But there's like a deeper level to this work that is a lot of people like do not fully understand yet. And the type of breath work that I have been doing is called holotropic breath work. It was kind of created or popularized, I think, in the 70s. It's been around for like a long time. There's other formats of breath work. Wim Hof is kind of one that was becoming popular for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And holotropic is kind of similar to that, where it's this like 2-part breath where you're breathing in and then you're breathing up and then you're breathing out and you're breathing at a certain rhythm. And then you will do maybe an exhale hold or an inhale hold. And people are like, okay, cool. Like I'm breathing, I'm relaxing, da 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 da. So I went to this class, and this was like when I was at the beginning of my chemo treatment, and I went to this class at a yoga studio, and I was like, this will be relaxing, da da da. I started crying, like all this emotion, and I thought I was doing a great job of managing my emotion, my experience, going for walks, like learning things that I needed to learn, like trying to stay positive, like talking to my family and my community about what I was. There was still a whole ocean of emotion that was underneath the surface that I wasn't cognitively aware of or couldn't tell, but it was there. And so the different types of breath work can do different things in your brain and your body, and it can kind of unlock or open up this kind of stored emotions that are underneath the surface. People who practice yoga like to talk about the pigeon pose, and sometimes you do the pigeon pose, which is a hip stretch. Like our body tends to like tighten in the hip and more at that like pelvic floor level when you're stressed. And when you do that pelvic floor stretch or that hip stretch, people will sometimes feel emotion come to the surface because it's tied to that place in your body where you've been holding that tension. And you're like, oh man, I really have had some feelings about what I'm going through. And I was kind of like putting them to the side to just get through my day to day. So anyways, I bawled my eyes out the first time I went to this class. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of things to be felt here that deserve to be acknowledged, right? Like deserve airtime
Sure.
in my mind to like integrate back into my body and my life, giving myself space to feel those feelings, kind of acknowledging, grief. Like all emotions that come up are valid in your lifetime. If you are angry, if you are sad, that is totally valid. And a lot of times we'll try to say like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, I should just move on, da, da, da. And like being able to have a positive attitude towards a cancer journey is a wonderful thing, right? But like that doesn't change the fact that it is horrible and terrifying and painful, and can be isolating. So that pain and suffering can be there and can be true. And then the other side of that, learning to have hope or have joy in the moment again, can come, and your suffering can be true and valid. Your feelings, your anger can be true and valid. But like the hope, the joy, the forgiveness, the positive side of that can be true at the same time. And learning to practice like acknowledging the negative, but then also shifting to move forward and put your attention and focus on the positive or what you want to happen. I heard a kind of a phrase when I was going through all my research and my healing journey, and it was to focus on the healing, not the disease. And when I would go through my chemo treatments and stuff like that, I would try to remember that as best as I could and think about my body healing, not think about the fact that I'm sick. Because
Right.
what you give your energy to or put your attention towards is what will grow in your life. So if you're focused on conflict, if you're focused on the negative thing that you're struggling with, it will amplify it, especially in your experience of your life, and your feeling and your experience. If you're focusing on it, how can you move on if you are focusing on that and that's what you're giving your attention to? That doesn't mean that it's not still there, but acknowledging it, but then working on then moving forward and reframing and saying, what do I want? I want to heal. It doesn't change the fact that I'm sick.
So I think you're talking about a lot of important things, and I'd like to kind of dive into a little bit more this duality. I am suffering, and yet I have gratitude. I'm focusing on wellness, and kind of how you balance those things. Because I think the other thing that really sucks about being a cancer survivor, and I say this as a physician, not as a cancer survivor, so I could be completely ignorant here, but cancer survivors are asked to make really complex decisions, right? And so our brains don't work as well. Like if we're in our limbic system, if we're in there, I'm wounded, I'm hurting, I'm scared, I'm afraid. It's hard to engage your frontal lobe and reason, right? And so trying to balance those two things, and also sort of thinking about one thing that I think is so remarkable about you is how you interacted with your medical team and advocated for yourself so well. So how did you kind of hold these two things? I want to be positive. I want to stay in my frontal lobe so that I can learn more about this, because I think you learned a lot more than a lot of your healthcare providers about your condition. And then also have space to be sad, like you talked about, to grieve what you've lost and those things. How did you hold these two seemingly opposite things at the same time?
It's tricky because I would want to be positive and not dwell on the negative things that were happening. But then I also had to go into my appointments, and when I talked to my care team, I wanted them to understand the side effects and how bad they are. But then I show up and I'm like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Da, 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 da. And then they'd be like, oh, okay, it sounds like you're great. And I'm like, no, I am not okay, actually. So it's kind of tough to even communicate like what you're going through when you want to show up positive, but then you do have to tell them, well, actually, like, I'm in a lot of pain, and I'm not sleeping, and this is affecting my quality of life, and I'm struggling at work, and the side effects of the medication from the hormones. And so with the care team, it is tricky. And sometimes I'd say, well, I'm experiencing this, but here's what I'm trying. And they'd be like, well, it sounds like you're doing a great job. It sounds like you're on a good path. You got to figure it out. I'm glad you found something that works. And I'd be like, well, yeah, but I also it's just me, it's just me figuring this stuff out. And you just feel like kind of alone and unsupported. Because they'd be like, well, great. We'll see you in 6 months for your next scan or whatever. So it can make you feel isolated. And then I found other people to rely on beyond my care team. My care team became like a bigger circle of folks, like the people at the yoga studio leading the classes, my like somatic therapy coach, you and your practice have helped me through my journey, and the folks around me. So your support system has to be more than your care team. And then I wanted to make sure that I mentioned on this podcast, since I have the opportunity to like tell this to people, is that like doing the research and looking at what people are learning in different communities. There's cancer survivor communities, cancer communities where people are reading books and sharing what they learn, is so much greater and more powerful than what your oncology team will recommend to you or what your primary care will recommend to you. There's so much out there that is not part of the standard of care. And sometimes it would be frustrating because there would be a conflict between the standard of care and what I'm learning in the community or from the research, where I'd be like, I want to take this herb or this thing. Or I had a big issue with fruits and vegetables going through treatment.
Yeah.
Because they were like, you can't have raw fruits or vegetables. And I was like, no. I was like, I need to eat these blueberries. These blueberries are like, there's like a study that's like people who eat blueberries once a day, their rates of cancer are like pretty significantly lower. So just fiber and antioxidants. So the problem is you might be immunocompromised, makes you more susceptible to food poisoning. So they don't want you eating anything raw. But my white counts were high. And so I'd be like, my white counts are normal, not high, but like normal, high relatively, speaking to someone who's going through chemotherapy. And so finally, after talking with them like 3 different appointments, bringing up the fruits and vegetables thing, they were like, yeah, it's fine. Your counts are good. You can, and I don't know if I just wore them out, but over these fruits and vegetables,
Right.
the blueberries were like my lifeline, because I'm putting this poison in my body with the chemo. And so they were like, just try not to eat too healthy right after your infusion, because we want it to do the damage to the cells. So antioxidants can have a protective effect on cancer cells. So I was like, okay, cool. I will eat fast food for 48 hours. And then like Monday, Tuesday, I'd be like, let me get some fiber up in here and these blueberries. And that like food really felt like the thing that I could do to help and protect and support myself. And with every meal that I ate going through treatment, I was like, this is healing me. This is going to be the difference between all the side effects, coming out the other side. This is going to help. Just the side effect management too. Like there were so many things I learned and discovered that were solutions. I'd say, hey, I'm having this side effect. And they'd be like, oh, I don't, we could maybe give you this medication. And then I do a bunch of research, maybe rely on ChatGPT, AI tools, whatever's out there. And I was having really bad tinnitus. I still have it a little bit here and there. And I found this thing called audio cardio that is this thing you can listen to help with tinnitus. And I was so excited about this audio cardio app because it helped me so much. There's so much, even just like the nerve damage. People put ice on their hands and feet while they're having their infusion to prevent the nerve damage. Well, online, I'm seeing some women going through the carboplatin and Taxol their doctors didn't tell them to do the ice. They said, oh, you can do ice. And some doctors didn't mention it. And I'm like, this is a huge difference in your quality of life. And all it is putting ice on your hands and feet through treatment.
Right.
And it's a huge difference. So sometimes I was like, just really struggled with the delta there. And there's also like vitamin D levels going through chemo. There's a lot of studies that show that people have better outcomes going through treatment if their D levels are normal. But the vitamin D test is not standard of care. They do not run a vitamin D level test.
And like
at
such
least
a,
not where I was.
Not an expensive, not a fancy, like, wow. Right.
So it makes me think about money and like, the cost of treatment and what insurance will approve and what can be part of standard of care is tied to what insurance will cover. I believe that's the sense I get, right? Like if it's something that, if everybody started getting D tests, like would the insurance company start pushing back on it? I don't know, but this is my lived experience of what I've seen, right? So.
I think you bring up so many important things. I remember when I started learning functional medicine, they said it takes 17 years for something to go from research to get into practice. And so that's so frustrating for everybody because it's so slow. And then I also think, particularly in OBGYN, right? There was a lot, like I'm 52. So I finished medical school in 2000. And so much of obstetrics was kind of lore. Well, this is how we do it at X school. This is how we do it at Duke. This is how we do it at UNC. This is how we did it at Northwestern, because we don't do studies on pregnant women, right? And doctors are people too that have their own biases. And it's just really unfortunate when people who ascribe to science and objectivity, that it takes so long to get something as basic as, hey, we've got a group of cancer survivors. We know that vitamin D is really important for the immune system. Why can't we just take a vitamin D like that? I'm so sorry. That sounds unbelievably frustrating to walk through this and think there's so many simple things like ice or getting a vitamin D level that would prevent suffering. Like you're saying, I'm coping. I'm working. I'm under the water, pedaling as hard as I can. They see you above the water and think she's not drowning. She's fine. Okay, we'll see you in 6 months. I'm really sorry. That sounds really hard and exhausting.
It was, but also I am thankful for the fact that I had the interest, time, and ability to do the research. Not everyone wants to sit and read studies, but I would get steroids with every infusion. And when I was in my 48 hours of steroids, like a lot of steroids on my system, I would just be like, blah, 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 reading everything I could find and learning so much. And it made me feel powerful to learn and to know, and that's like, I'm thankful to have that interest and to, it can be overwhelming, right? But there's lots of different formats of information out there. So doctors are humans and they are wonderful humans and I'm thankful for them, but one human is not enough. 2 humans is not enough, right? Like there's so many different perspectives out there. And the 14-year thing, I had speculated, okay, maybe it's like a decade or something, because I'm looking at the studies and I'm like, wow, there's crazy stuff coming. There's so many things. There's so many studies and the conclusion will be more research is needed.
Yes.
How do you get that research funded, right? Like where can they recoup the cost of the research they need to make money at the end of it all? And money does limit like what things end up coming to the market and what ends up kind of the standard of care, because they do need to make revenue for these organizations and stuff to survive, for these companies to survive. So that's all well and good, but it's not the only thing, right? It's not the only thing. And but there's so much out there, and yeah.
And I think that when we think about more natural medicine and more natural approaches, usually research is funded by pharmaceutical companies, right? And if who's going to fund the study on blueberries, right? Like blueberry farmers aren't going to be able to swing it. And so, that's another barrier. And certainly we wish that we were from a national level funding all kinds of research that's getting defunded right now. And so hopefully we will move towards a political leadership that values science and that values research of all kinds, because that's how we make progress and support everybody. You have been through menopause on steroids, right? You've been through sort of surgical menopause with an estrogen blocker. And I think this is a transition point for lots of women. So certainly going through a surgical plus a chemical menopause is a different experience than going through natural menopause. But it's a challenge for a lot of women that can happen a lot of different ways. How would you what would you say to someone who's going through this transition, be it surgical, chemical, natural, where they're feeling really disconnected from their bodies? What words of wisdom would you offer for them?
Just that phrase, disconnected from your bodies, like, is so important. Like, it's good to sit and take stake and feel, like, how do I feel? How does my body feel? Do I feel like I'm connected to my body or not? Because that connection between your mind and body you do need to foster that, like, you do need to spend time nurturing that and looking out for that. And a lot of times women are conditioned to put their own needs as secondary, and that compromises your ability. It can hurt, your ability to take that time for yourself and to really listen, really, really listen. And I don't mean just like to sit and to breathe and to listen. And for folks who maybe haven't done meditation before, when you first start to learn about meditation, you're like, oh, I'm supposed to like not think of anything. That's not true. Like, you don't work, like, you're supposed to just feel what comes up and let it come and acknowledge it, but don't let it sit and ruminate. Acknowledge it and try to let it pass through. Sometimes I think about clouds, like just passing through my mind. So it's okay for things to come up. If you're going to do some kind of meditation or breathwork practice, it's not about a discipline of thinking of nothing. It is about actually allowing up to come what is there, like inside of yourself, what you're truly feeling. You might realize, oh, I actually am like upset about a thing. Like, that's a very important experience to have, is to uncover those like things. And I see people in the world expressing their anger maybe towards their partner or on the internet, on social media or whatever. Are they really mad at their partner for that thing that's happening in that moment? Or there's usually a deeper thing, there's always like a deeper thing. And then there's usually a deeper reason why that deeper thing bothers you. And then it's the somatic practice will often ask, like, what is the earliest time in your life that you remember feeling this way? Because like your triggers are usually are tied to patterns of things that you've experienced throughout your life. And you're like, oh, I get angry when I don't feel heard, and that makes me angry, or I get upset when. And so these things will come. And if you take on this type of practice and this type of work, you'll find that there's so many layers to your experience. And by acknowledging them and allowing them to come to the surface, you can reintegrate them into your life. So all that to say, when you're struggling with menopause and you're struggling with whatever it is, like, it is totally, totally valid. And to work on your nutrition or experiment with like trying different supplements or a medication is all part of that journey as well. But taking time to like listen to yourself, maybe journal, breathe, like light a candle and sit in a space that makes you feel comfortable, and maybe set aside time for yourself. Like, this is a huge part of healing that can have an effect at a physiological level.
Yeah, I love that. I think I've gotten really into art and I suck, but like I had my menopause birthday, I hit the year and I'm spending way too much time at the art studio to the detriment of I'm not getting books written and things done. But yeah, like, it's got to come out somewhere. And right now it's coming out for me in bad pottery. So like, just keep doing it. But you've talked a lot about somatic therapy and breath work. And so I'd love to, if you could give people like the next gentle step that they could take, like, because you've listed a lot of really good resources like Gabor Mate and the Body Keeps Score and some breathwork classes you've done. Do you have any like little nuggets where there's a kind of an entry ramp to these things where people could go someplace specifically to get started?
My yoga studio that I went to where I started was Dose Yoga. There are locations that are in Raleigh and Durham. They have multiple locations. Now, their wellness classes, like where I started going with the holotropic breathwork, was a class called Breath and Beat at Dose Yoga. It is at their Raleigh North Hills location, and they will be having that class in Durham, I believe. So you can check for that class on the website. But if you do not want to go in person, if you're more comfortable with doing something online or starting out by yourself, there's lots of resources like I mentioned, Wim Hof. Wim Hof is very accessible. There's an app, there's YouTube videos, but Wim Hof is really just like the breathwork practice that doesn't do necessarily like the psychological work or the somatic work. It's not truly a somatic practice because it's more of like a biohacking approach
Mm-hmm.
to breath work. But if you have pain and tension in your body and you're dealing with chronic pain, Wim Hof can be truly amazing. It's deeply relaxing for your body and muscles and allows a lot of tension to be released. There are some virtual classes that for holotropic breath work available through my coach's website, Emily Bird. She has a Patreon called, her practice is called Shakti Soma. So we can provide like the link to that and plug to that. But if you are a Patreon subscriber, she does these virtual classes throughout the week that are really wonderful. And so that might be a lower barrier to entry if someone doesn't want to go to a class in person. But Dose was great for me. I love it there. I love going there. They do hot yoga as well. There might be other resources around this area. So yeah.
I looked at Dose and I thought your class was on Wednesdays and I didn't see it, but maybe I didn't get the name right. So it's called Breath Me
Breath and Beat.
and Beat, Beat.
Yes,
Okay.
because it is holotropic breathwork to music, and your breathing is to the beat of the music.
We'll link to those in the show notes so people have just an easy link that they can check it out. So anything you want to kind of leave people with, like what you wish you had known earlier in your healing journey? Because nobody knows when they're going to get hit with, no one plans these diagnoses, no one plans these things. So I think that could be great advice for everybody.
So I will just say that like the things that I've gone through and these techniques and practices that I'm speaking about, it's not just about cancer, it's about anything that you're facing.
Mm-hmm.
Neurodegenerative and anything related to inflammation in the body. And so no matter what you're facing, these things could be helpful, but advocate for yourself. Do not accept like your doctor as the ultimate authority on what the right plan is for you or the whole plan for you. You could be compromising your wellness in your life. Like if I had listened to my OBGYN and not gotten referred to oncology, the length of my life would be significantly shorter,
Mm-hmm.
than because of this, right? I had to ask to be referred to oncology, and that was a life-saving moment for me. So always advocate for yourself. The answers are out there. If you look for answers, you will find them. They are there, and you are so much more powerful than you realize. We are not even scraping the surface of the power that we have in our lives. So,
Okay, so one last thing, which I think
mhm.
is powerful at this moment in history. What gives you hope moving forward?
Um, well, working in technology gives me hope. I love the intersection of these things, like wellness and like the psychological and somatic and spiritual side of life and technology. And like, how do we get answers to people? How do we give access to information to people? And when I was young and the internet was invented, I was so excited about it, and I still am. I've always been excited about getting information to people and how do we communicate with one another, and how do we get information to people in a way that lands and compels them to make a change in their life, to have a better life, So I'm always thinking about that every day. I'm like, how do we relay information to people in a way that is accessible to them, can land to them and make a difference? Because if we can change our minds, we can change the world politically and medically and everything. So, but we are creatures of habit. So how do we create catalysts for people?
Well, and then you used your illness to move towards wellness, right?
Yes.
And not just physical wellness, but emotional, mental, spiritual wellness. And so that's inspiring. And thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it. I feel like this is a gold for a lot of people, and I hope that people will hear that this conversation is really relevant for everyone, because nobody knows when the next thing is coming, right? It could be your health crisis. It could be a family member's health crisis. But if we could do some of this work, if we could get in touch more with our mind-body connection, if we could start learning some breath work, and like these resources, these virtual online things are very accessible, then we're going to weather that next storm that we don't even know if it's coming so much better if we already have these things in place. So I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your journey with us. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This has been wonderful. And if it helps just one person, then, it brings me so much joy.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. Take care. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today on this episode of Menopause Rescue. If you enjoyed today's conversation, we'd love it if you left us a 5-star review and share the podcast with friends or family. It's one of the best ways to help us help more women find support and start restoring their health. If you're looking for personalized menopause care, our clinic, Hormone Wellness MD, currently accepts patients in North Carolina and Alabama. A great first step is our new patient welcome course, Are We a Good Fit?, which is linked in the show notes. It's a quick, easy way to see if our approach feels right for you. And if you're ready to go deeper on your health journey, be sure to check out our membership. It covers over 100 video lectures, reviewing everything from bone health to libido, as well as a supportive community of like-minded women to cheer you on every step of the way. Before we go, just a friendly reminder, this podcast is for general educational purposes only and isn't a substitute for medical care. No doctor-patient relationship is formed by listening. Always make medical decisions with your own healthcare provider, and don't delay seeking care for any health concerns. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time on Menopause Rescue.